How's it going, everybody? So in this video, I'm going to be responding to one of my subscribers' questions or comments surrounding eating one meal a day, protein intake, chronic kidney disease or protein and its relation to, worsening kidney health, or just eating a large bolus of protein in one meal and how it might affect the kidneys, as well as things like inflammation and water retention, specifically in regards to eating one meal a day and spreading protein intake out throughout the day. There's a lot to unpack here in this one comment, but we're going to try to keep it concise and informative and as specific to the question as possible. So we're going to read his comment, it's his comment, I think. His name's Connor. Piece and respond piece by piece. They do end it with a nice compliment. Love your vids, and when you post videos, I click. You deserve more followers for the work you put in. When you post, I immediately click like. So it's great to see people who watch my content and hold it with such high regard. Okay, so, and mind you, I have a lot of experience, both with the research, but also with actual practice of eating one meal a day or eating high protein and carnivore diets, as well as with clients as well, who have had amazing results with it. So let's kind of get into it, right? Okay, so on my video discussing basically why I don't use scientific evidence as a guiding principle necessarily, especially mechanistic studies. It's called "You Are a Pseudoscientist and That's Okay." That's my video. Basically, this my subscriber Connor says, 30 minutes into the video, you talk about inflammation. I wonder what your take is on eating more frequently throughout the day, specifically splitting up protein intake 3 to 4 meals a day. When I started doing this, I dramatically reduced the puffiness and swollen look I had in my ankles, face, body, and overall, and I'm feeling less heavy, like it's easier to move, as opposed to when I was eating one meal a day and fasting. Basically, he continues on saying that by splitting up his protein into 3 to 4 meals, he feels like he's looking more muscular and leaner, as well as feeling like he released some water weight. So he's basically saying, so he says that he suspects he had muscle wasting while doing one meal a day, because supposedly the body prioritizes burning muscle over fat when doing long periods of fasting. And he says he got this information from Stephanie Keto Person on YouTube. Okay, so for reference, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm throwing any shade at Stephanie at all. She was one of the pioneering ketogenic YouTubers, putting out ketogenic diet information and ketosis information long before anyone else on YouTube. I think she's been on YouTube talking about keto since like 2008, 2009. I used to follow her for like 2 years pretty closely. So she's been on this diet for over 20 years. And remember, ketosis is a state of metabolism. It's not a diet per se. And I think she was like a professional skateboarder and stuff like that. And she was one of the first people to introduce the ketogenic community to the researchers, that pioneered the keto research, right? And that's Jeff Volek and Stephen Finney. Always have this book up here. It's one of my favorites of all time. Always recommending people to read this book. It basically provides a complete half of the scientific literature and mechanisms of the body and metabolism that is completely missing from mainstream nutrition and exercise science textbooks. But anyway, yeah, she introduced Dr. Westman, Dr. Volek, and Finney, who pioneered the research to YouTube. So, obviously kudos to her. The problem is she speaks in a lot of absolute terms about concepts that are not backed by research, or at the very least, there's not sufficient causal evidence to be speaking dogmatically. And over the years, she become more and more dogmatic and talking about a lot of hormonal concepts and things that aren't entirely true. So anyway, let's kind of talk about these points first of all. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack in just this part, right? So first of all, inflammation, when people talk about inflammation, there's a huge difference between water retention. Okay, water retention should not be a discussion when we're talking about pathogenic inflammation, right? So when we think about inflammation in a pathogenic sense, we think about it in relation to chronic disease states, right? So inflammatory bowel disease, for example, irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. Inflammatory bowel disease is basically when you're eating a lot of foods or you have a virus or something that basically irritates the lining of your intestine. And you can think of it as damaging the intestine, irritating the intestine. And when the intestine is irritated in this fashion, it'll actually puff up and grow. But that's at a cellular level, and that has more to do with kind of like a damage and healing process on the body's tissues itself. And it has nothing to do with water retention per se. It puffs up and inflames in response to damage, okay, and irritation. And obviously that turns into pain, and then it also turns into swelling and redness. If you look at an actual, swelling as in it gets bigger cellularly due to damage. And obviously your poop is going to be like tiny strands of strings rather than giant kind of puffed up, bulky poops, right? Because the stool takes on the form of the narrowness or the wideness of your intestine. So narrow stools are a sign of inflammatory intestine, right? Inflamed intestine. And obviously that's going to come with symptoms relating to disease, and it is caused by something that can trigger disease later on. Typically, at least in my experience, it was undigestible matter, particularly cellulose and harder fibers from grains, right? And you'll find a lot of people with the same kind of inflammatory bowel disease and things like Crohn's disease. Typically, you'll find the root cause tends to be certain plant fibers, actually, which is one of the main reasons why the carnivore diet seems to help a lot of people with digestive disorders and even autoimmune issues, not because plants are poisonous or of anything magical, but because some of these plants tend to cause issues for some people on an individual level and irritate the intestine or what have you, which can cause the immune system to react, which can cause a wide variety of different so-called inflammatory systems. But inflammation in this regard is very, very different from when people have water retention and call that inflammation. It's not the same thing. And obviously arterial inflammation, right? Inflammation in the arterial walls in response to plaquing or really damage to the arterial wall from foods that people call inflammatory. Labeling foods as inflammatory is not scientifically accurate. Anyway, that we'll have to make a whole nother video on because he's not asking a question about that, but just to kind of define inflammation is very important. Usually when you hear people say like, avoid these foods because they're inflammatory, these foods don't cause inflammation, okay? Foods can cause damage to the body, and the body has an inflammatory response meant to heal it while the body's trying to recover. It's trying to protect it with the inflammation, right? An example to illustrate this is if somebody stabs you in the arm with a fucking knife, okay? That's a freaking brutal example, but it's accurate and relevant nonetheless. Someone stabs you in the arm with a fucking knife, right? the knife is not inflammatory. They didn't inflame you with the knife. What they did is they stabbed you, they damaged the skin, and that's triggering the body to respond by hopefully clotting up, the broken, blood vessels and things on the arm. And then, it's really swollen. It hurts really bad. And then hopefully if you manage to survive, they stitch up the arm or whatever. And then it's puffed up, it's red, it's swollen, it's warm, it's inflamed. There's a lot of blood moving to that area, and it heals over time. So the knife itself, just like what people call inflammatory foods, they're not inflammatory foods. It's not an inflammatory knife. It's a damaging knife. It irritated the body, and in this case, pierced the skin and almost killed you. And so it's important to understand that. Okay, anytime someone says, this food caused inflammation, an inflammatory response, you get rid of a lot of inflammation, and they're talking about water weight, they're not speaking mechanistically accurate, and thus probably not a good guru to follow for mechanistic information. Accurate speaking is very important, and unfortunately, the vast majority of nutrition experts on YouTube and Instagram, especially TikTok, they speak inaccurately in this way. It does bother me, and it misinforms the public. And then there's a huge disconnect between practitioners that get results with clients and academics that pioneer research, and then these like social media gurus and whatnot themselves. And mind you, a protocol can work really well. Like I've talked about Dr. Sebi and why you shouldn't, shun him, because his protocol definitely got people results. There's documented reports, but it's a mechanism that he got wrong. Trying to claim that acidic foods and, shit like that are the cause and the cure or whatever, when people on a ketogenic diet get the same kind of results, and their diet by nature is very acidic, right? But it's not how acidic the diet is or how alkaline or whether it's meat or not. It's what is this diet program that Dr. Sebi did to get those results? What is it doing in the body exactly? And why is it that we can eat a ketogenic diet and get the same results? What is the common mechanism? Which I mentioned in other videos is autophagy, right? Anyway, so yeah. It's important to look at real-world outcomes and what's going on and get rid of this mechanistic jargon if you don't actually understand it. So, long-winded way of saying that we're not talking about inflammation. We're talking about water retention, okay? So, now, in regards to water retention, okay, so this person's saying that they noticed when they're eating one meal a day, they had a lot of water retention going on. And then for some reason, splitting that, and they're eating mostly meat from what they're telling me. They're suggesting they're eating a carnivore diet. So they're basically eating 200 to 250 grams of protein from meat in one meal. Okay. And now they're splitting it up into, I'm going to assume 50 to 75 grams split into 3 to 4 meals throughout the day. And they notice that a night and day difference and that there's no water retention anymore. Okay. So, and the muscle wasting thing we're going to get to in a second. That's going to be a whole can of worms to open up. And it's definitely annoying that people tell you 1 meal a day will make your muscles waste away. Okay. Get into that in a second, because I'm very, very familiar with the research on protein synthesis and muscle retention and this and that and meal timing. Okay. So anyway, what's probably happening here? So first of all, if you suspect you might have chronic kidney disease, okay, if you have kidney pain, any kind of symptoms of kidney disease, go see your freaking medical doctor and get them tested. It is true, okay, that a lot of doctors might give you inaccurate information on protein and its relation to kidney health, okay? And we'll get to that here in a bit. However, getting tested and diagnosed with kidney disease can literally be life or death, okay? If you suspect you have kidney disease, and let's just kind of state the obvious, you're noticing you have water retention issues. I believe he said he had kidney pain. Kidney pain and other indicators of chronic kidney disease, and it was alarming. And then he says that made him want to change, moderate his protein intake, and split it into more meals. I mean, look, my guy, that's cool, and I'm glad you're being proactive in that regard and taking steps to improve your situation. But you should if you suspect you have chronic kidney disease, that's a deeper issue that could still become a problem no matter what kind of moderate protein intake and stuff you do in the future. So definitely go see a doctor or get some kind of kidney disease test done, okay, however you do it. Because me personally, I'd rather for myself go and get lab tests and then analyze them myself, but I have the knowledge on all of this to be able to solve these issues, provided I have the testing. But getting tested, getting diagnosed, and consulting with someone more knowledgeable in the situation than you is very important. Just get tested, though, is all I'm saying. I'm not saying go to a medical doctor and then, do whatever they say, but go to a medical doctor and get tested and get diagnosed, okay? So, because, there's a lot of obviously glaringly indicators here, okay? So that's the first thing. So the next thing about this is, why exactly do I believe that somebody could have differences in retention? Okay, water retention when they switch from 1 meal a day to splitting their protein up throughout the day. So the first and most obvious. So what is it? A claims raiser? Is that the concept? It's a philosophical concept that claims that typically the most simplest answer is oftentimes the most true, but I don't really abide by that. But going by a claims raiser, okay. Essentially, what's most common here is when you eat even just protein, even if you are on a keto or a low carb diet, okay, when you consume protein, there will be a insulin response to shuttle certain amino acids into the bloodstream or into the cells and whatnot. Obviously, you also have glucagon in response, which lowers insulin and blood sugar after the fact. However, there's an insulin response from eating protein any time of the day. And the insulin response also encourages the kidney to retain water. So all that I'm saying is, if you're noticing you retain more water or you even release more water, right, that is a sign that the frequent meals might be triggering maybe diuretic hormone, right? So it's antidiuretic hormone and diuretic hormone. Somehow, some way, it might be modifying your aldosterone levels, your antidiuretic hormone, and thus balancing out your electrolytes and water retention when you do eat, okay? So I would say this might have more to do with the insulin response and the cascading kind of effects on electrolytes when you eat more frequently. And you'd be surprised how much of a difference a stimulus from eating protein can have on electrolyte levels, okay? Especially if you're training hard and stuff like that, you know what I'm saying? You're talking about muscle growth and muscle retention. If you're actually following a high-intensity weight training program, maybe you're sweating a lot and stuff like that, and this may be the case. So I would wager that is the number one most relevant thing that's probably happening. So obviously with ketosis, you have the diuresis of fasting and the diuresis of ketosis. Just being in ketosis causes a lot of challenges with water retention as a whole, particularly in the first, 2 months or so, the first 8 weeks, really in the first 3 to 4 weeks, okay? But when you fast on top of that, even if you're eating a high carb diet, fasting past 18 hours, 100% can and does typically contribute to water retention issues. Now, what's interesting is typically when you're in ketosis and you are fasting, you actually have the opposite issue. Usually what happens is you lose most of your water weight. People typically drop 10 to 15 pounds of water weight the first 3 weeks or so of ketosis, especially when you're fasting. Now, for me personally, I generally almost always only eat 1 meal a day, and it's mostly 2 pounds of meat with like a container of yogurt usually and some protein powder and sometimes some honey and stuff, depending on what I'm doing. And I notice even if I consume honey and high carb foods on 1 meal a day, mostly carnivore, but higher carb than a lot of people, then I still need to supplement salt throughout the day. Now, I had mentioned that to this person on the comment, and I think YouTube might have deleted their comment or something, because I swear I saw them reply before, but it's not there anymore. And YouTube has this, I don't know what it does, but it will mysteriously, randomly fucking delete comments, and I can't even find them in my comment review area. I don't know why it does that. It's been doing that for years. People notice it, and YouTube doesn't say shit about it. So YouTube's like, oh no, it's all in your head. It's all in imagination. Anyway, I think they said that they were supplementing like 2 tablespoons of salt throughout the day on 1 meal a day. So to be honest, I would have looked more into my salt supplementation before, rather than just automatically go to like changing meal timing. Just because it probably has more to do with that. Okay. However, when this person says it's a night and day difference, it's life changing, they felt like they had chronic kidney disease eating 1 meal a day, and now they feel amazing and all this shit, and it's life changing. I just don't see any reason as to why you would go back to 1 meal a day if you're feeling amazing doing this, right? I follow 1 meal a day because when I train a lot during the day, and if I eat around training, I feel like garbage. Like I can't roll on jiu-jitsu with meat sloshing around my stomach. It's pretty bad, actually. I feel like horrible when I eat throughout the day. Also, because my job involves teaching people how to deadlift and stuff, I'm constantly doing submaximal deadlifts and lifts throughout the day, moving around, yelling at people to lift heavy and shit like that. So, I just feel lethargic and slow and tired if I eat throughout the day. So, for me, 1 meal a day is very beneficial. But for you, you know what I'm saying? Like, if your lifestyle and everything does way better on eating throughout the day, then the fact that you feel better is what matters. But scientifically speaking, you should have the opposite issue. But that's why I think that it's the salt probably. It has something to do with salt supplementation and a combination of eating more frequently, right? But still, usually the insulin response would cause water retention, not water wasting, right? So I don't know why eating more frequently would change that in that regard. Now let me get to the next thing. Okay, so we haven't even gotten to protein and its effects on kidney, right? On kidney health, because that could be the thing, and we'll get to that in a bit. Again, see your freaking doctor if you suspect you have kidney disease, right? This is not medical advice, y'all. This person explicitly asked for my opinion, so. So as far as like muscle wasting, it's hilarious to me that people actually believe if they don't fucking dose protein throughout the day, then they're gonna start wasting away. So this is scientifically incorrect. Okay, so there's a lot of different things to mention here. So the very first thing is, and it's been a while since I dug into the research on this, but 2020, I was really looking into interviews and lectures and research done by, I believe, Donald Layman. I don't remember if that was his name. I haven't even researched any of this stuff. I haven't reviewed it today or, before doing this comment. But for a whole year, I was obsessed with this. I believe it's Donald Layman. I believe that's his name. And he's like a leading researcher pioneering the field of protein synthesis and sparing protein and stuff like that, amino acid recycling. There's a lot of things to consider here. The first thing is that protein, when you eat it in whole animal food form, okay, obviously digestion. When you eat like 2 pounds of meat, right, in one sitting, okay, you eat 250 grams of protein in one sitting from whole animal food. Digestion itself, there's like a rate limiting process where your body kind of has a slow feeding of amino acids over the next 16 to 18 to 24 hours. So if you eat a large bolus of protein from animal meat before you go to bed, then number one, for me, I think that's actually good for sleep. A lot of people, they obsess over research about eating before bed interfering with sleep and all this other stuff. And I think that's just, people trying to sell you books overcomplicating subjects you don't really need to worry about. But the rest and digest system, everyone's experience where they eat a lot of food in one sitting, like on Thanksgiving or something, and then they get the itis, what they call, right? Where you just feel like you want to go to sleep. And that's because the rest and digest system, you're not meant to eat a bunch of food and then go out and train and exercise and run a marathon. In practical application, going out and hunting, generally humans through millions of years of evolution only hunted when they didn't have food, when they were empty stomached. And then when they go and they'd actually finally kill something to eat, they just sprinted and ran, thrown spears, and beat the shit out of a damn mammoth or whatever, which is very physically vigorous. And then, of course, what do you have? You have a couple 1,000 pounds of meat or something sitting there. You didn't have refrigeration at the time. So, of course, you eat a couple pounds or whatever, and then you carry it on your back all the way to camp or whatever, and then probably pass out from physical exhaustion and eating as much meat as you can at that moment, because you're probably not going to see food again for another week or so, let alone have the energy to go do it. And you already have 1,000 pounds of meat for your camp right there. And how do they preserve that? With salt, with dirt, putting it underground, 40,000 milligrams of freaking sodium if preserving with salt. That's how much we did in recent years. Anyway, point is, rest and digest versus what? You're going to eat some meat throughout the day and like have perfect sleep rhythms and shit like that. Meal timing was nothing like, back in the day is nothing like it is now. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is maybe, eating a huge bolus of meat or whatever before bed might not be the worst thing. But that's even besides the point of this video. I'm sorry, I got off track. Now, here's the thing, though. Over the course of the next, 20 hours, basically your body has a rate-limiting process that slowly drips large peptides into the digestive tract and amino acids in the bloodstream, okay? And this isn't this idea that, meat is hard to digest or something, okay? Because if you think meat's fucking hard to digest, it's almost completely pulverized by hydrochloric acid and pepsin, okay, and doesn't even see much of the colon like plant foods do. Obviously, plant foods are a whole nother ballgame. You don't even have enzymes to digest those, whereas you do for meat. Obviously, most people on my channel know that plant foods are almost completely digested by bacteria in the intestine, and that takes forever. And the whole time you're just farting and bloating and shit like that while you're digesting the plants, which is why I personally don't eat them. Talk about lethargic and puffed up, feeling. Anyway, where's it going with that? Yeah. not only digestion wise, but also amino acid drip, wise. Okay, so once the protein is mostly digested, then there is kind of like this buffer effect of amino acids dripping in the bloodstream and going where they need to go. Okay, so there's this misconception that overeating protein in one meal, let alone overeating protein throughout the day, that there's this limit. There's only so much protein your body can digest in one meal, or that there's only so much protein your body can digest and utilize in one day. The reality is it's never been shown in studies, and actually the opposite has been shown. Okay, so we have mechanistic research from Donald Layman or whoever it was, showing that there seems to be a buffer effect, a rate loading process where you still digest and utilize at least 70% of the protein over the next 20 to 30 hours or whatever, right? Obviously, we have anecdotal evidence, bodybuilders, athletes, people like myself who don't waste away and make plenty of gains eating that one meal. Then you have evidence from the evidence-based nutrition community who try to tell you to optimize protein synthesis. You're supposed to be consuming protein every 2 to 3 hours or something. But what you have to understand is the difference between people in these studies who eat maybe once or twice, right? All the same protein in one or two meals, compared to the ones who eat in 3 or 4 meals. There is a slight difference in these studies, but in practice, you might see a difference of 1 to 4 pounds of muscle gain in a span of 10 fucking years. That's how little of a difference that really is. And in practical sense, if you're someone who has trouble getting in that protein at all throughout the day, you know what I mean, let alone in multiple meals, then it cancels itself out anyway, because if you're just not able to stay consistent with the 4 meals a day, you won't be making jack shit gains over a period of time if you don't just get the fucking protein in, right? The difference in muscle gain from the people spreading the protein out in multiple meals compared to 1 or 2 meals a day, and these studies are so fucking little, it almost equates to statistical noise, where it's not even relevant, clinically significant. So that comes down to personal preference more than anything. But yeah, total protein intake throughout the day is what's most important, not meal timing and crap like that. Okay, you know who benefits though, who profits from multiple meals a day? Protein supplement companies, right? Which most of these studies are funded by like whey protein supplement companies, So, I mean, or nutrition coaching companies who have to make it more complicated than it needs to be to make fucking money off their books and stuff. So, I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. But you follow the academics who make this research, and they don't make their money off these things, right? I'm not talking about Lane Norton or Renaissance periodization. They profit off of making things more complicated, even though I love those people a lot. You know what I'm saying? Maybe not Lane Norton. I don't like him. But anyway, so yeah. And you got lots of athletes who do 1 meal a day and they don't see muscle loss, right? So total protein intake throughout overall each day, combined with an adequate stimulus for muscle growth, which is so fucking little. As little as a couple body weight push-ups a day for chest muscle retention, or the minimum dose of training pioneered by Dr. Pack, who's leading research right now in the field. Awesome. Definitely subscribe to his channel. Dr. Pack has shown as little as 1 set to failure and the range of 75 to 85% of 1 rep max on a muscle group per week can actually retain and gain muscle from week to week. So you don't even need that much volume of training, you know what I'm saying, as long as it's adequately intense, combined with enough total protein intake throughout the day. And you'll be making plenty of fucking gains and definitely retaining. So to think your muscle's going to waste if you don't eat every 3 to 4 hours, it's not evolutionarily consistent. It's not scientifically consistent. It's not rationally sane thing to think. when the research is showing such a measly little amount of muscle gain stimulus with resistance training, let alone protein intake is, Another thing is the evidence on protein intake, okay? So there's a lot of studies showing that, and I don't recommend this for health purposes and anecdotal evidence, but to retain muscle, the lower end of protein intake necessary is something like it's something like 1 gram per kilo of body weight, okay? More like 1.2 grams per kilo of body weight at the lower end seems to be sufficient for retaining muscle mass. Retaining. It's not in any way, shape, or form optimal, especially for gaining muscle, but evidence suggests that about 1.2 grams of protein per kilo, which to me is super low. I never recommend it. And that's overall throughout the day, right? And so if we're thinking getting enough protein in multiple meals, you're probably getting around there per meal if you did that. And 1 meal a day, you're definitely this guy's eating 2 times the amount of protein than the minimum recommended intake needed to retain muscle. So, and it depends on what studies you're looking at, right? But, so again, though, I recommend most people to get around, honestly, at the minimum intake, if we're talking maximal growth, okay, scientifically, around 1 gram per pound or 2 grams per kilo of ideal body weight, whatever your goal weight is, and grams of protein from whole animal source food, so you get plenty of nutrition along with it. And it doesn't matter what time during the day or how many meals a day you get it in, right? But if you really want to maximize growth, in my opinion, especially on lower calorie intakes, 2.5 to 3, what was I saying? 1.5 to 2 grams of protein per pound of ideal body weight would be what I would suggest, okay? And that's looking at more hardcore trainers and coaches and athletes who swear by it anecdotally, and some evidence as well that I'm about to get into here in a bit. So we're talking Dante Trudel and a couple of other people, even though Dante Trudel is more working with enhanced athletes, but still. So now let's get into the really awesome research around protein intakes, okay? Around muscle wasting and protein intakes. Okay, so here's something interesting. So there was an intervention trial. I'll link it down below if I can find it again. I'm certain I have it in my fucking bookmarks. In 2021, I was really, really into this research. So there was an intervention trial. It was like a 12-week study, and it basically is a protein overfeeding study. So they took sedentary individuals who don't even eat, who eat like, they're eating like 80 grams of protein on average, okay? And they're sedentary. Desk job workers, didn't even do strength training, right? And they doubled one group doubled their protein intake. So they went to about 160 grams on average from the 80 grams they were eating. And the other group just continued eating the same amount of protein intake they were eating, right? And over a course of 12 weeks, without even adding strength training to their program, these people actually had seen something crazy, like a 3.3 kilogram increase in lean mass, and just from doubling their protein compared to the baseline group, the changes were statistically and clinically insignificant. So a 3.3 kilogram improvement in lean mass, increase in lean mass on average, okay, just from doubling protein intake over 12 weeks, okay, with no added resistance training at all, okay? So first of all, that tells you, to me at least, that a lot of human beings, and that's, the average human diet, most people are not holding on to a healthy amount of muscle mass. Their body's naturally trying to add muscle mass to the activities they do, just sitting around all day. But people are under-eating protein as a whole and overeating carbohydrate foods and things like that. So that's the first thing, okay? The second thing is there's actually there's been studies where groups of humans that they basically were eating at a baseline, and I think these were trained athletes, and they're eating at a baseline of like 2,800 calories or something like that. They're eating at like their baseline metabolic rate or whatever, and basically one group one group added something like 800 calories from protein, and the other group added 800 calories from like a mixture of carbs and fats or something like that. And what they found was an equal amount of added body mass, something like 6 pounds or something. And this was like, I think this was another 12-week study. But basically the group that was overeating those calories from protein, the amount of mass that they gained was all lean mass, whereas the group that got the added calories from carbs and fats, it was all body fat. So anyway, I'll have to find that study because clearly I don't remember the specifics of it, but it's something crazy, right? It was a pretty crazy difference. So every single study that's shown overfeeding protein or increasing protein at all, regardless of meal timing, has shown increases in lean mass with little to no kind of negative outcomes, right? So to me, what this points towards is when you increase protein, whether it's in one meal a day or multiple meals a day, just overall increase of protein, the body utilizes it very powerfully. Okay, it's not just like pissing out amino acids through the kidneys and this and that and causing a huge burden if your kidneys are healthy. We're gonna get to that in a second. But it's also not adding body fat, clearly. It seems to, when you eat muscle, you gain muscle, and I know that sounds simplistic. Obviously, there's other things too, neurotransmitters, enzyme production. For me personally, I hypothesize a lot of mood disorders, a lot of sleep issues. Have you noticed how many people talk about profound benefits of taking isolated L-tyrosine as a supplement or a nootropic, taking isolated 5-HTP and tryptophan and serotonin precursors as a nootropic? You hear all sorts of people taking glutamine as, and all these amino acid supplements on an empty stomach and seeing benefit. But you also see a lot of the same benefits when people switch over to a super high protein intake, eating beyond, 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight, right? We're talking for a 200-pound individual like myself, eating 300 grams or more protein per day, specifically from whole animal foods, but even from whey protein. I've seen my sleep, my recovery, everything transcend dramatically when I do that. And when I undereat protein, I get all the symptoms of overtraining, just whether I'm in a calorie deficit or not. So anyway, again, kind of outside the scope of this person's question, but what I'm getting across here is this idea that there's too much protein someone can eat. I think number one is most people actually have the opposite problem. They're not eating enough, clearly. And number two, it hasn't been validated by research. We don't know where the upper end of protein intake is to where your body starts pissing it out, or even storing it as body fat. That's never been shown in the research, okay? It's written in textbooks. People think a calorie is a calorie in that regard. A calorie of protein is not just a calorie of protein. I can assure you that. But carbs and fats, more, obviously it's more accurate. But protein does not act like a normal so-called calorie as we conceptualize it in the body. However, if protein does anything when you eat it in excess, okay, I will say it definitely doesn't store as body fat, but it more than likely would end up as like urea and, being excreted through the kidneys and more than likely the stool, as amino acids, though, not large peptides. So people who say that meat rots in the intestine, that's not how the fuck things work. Amino acids, getting digested through the intestine, yeah, that works. You know what I mean? But so does the vast majority of the structural components of the plant foods you're eating. What does that say? That, people are like, oh, it rots in your intestine, meat. Like, no, amino acids are digested if you eat too much of them. But that is such a rare incidence. Most people don't eat too much protein. Most people eat way too little, no matter what the timing is. Okay, anyway, let's get off this subject and move on. So the big thing, though, that this person's asking is, this protein and high protein intakes, does it damage the kidneys? There's so much we have to unpack with this, protein affecting the kidneys, right? So, first of all, there are some epidemiology studies that correlate high protein intakes with, abnormal kidney markers and potential increases in kidney disease. But you have to also look at the fact that most of these studies are done on free-living populations of people who are not, when you look at the individual data sets in these studies, on average, they're still eating like 80 grams of freaking protein a day. Or under 100 grams, like whatever the average American's eating. And so typically, average humans who aren't eating that protein with the intention to improve their health, their increasing protein intake, their high protein intake is actually a reflection of eating more fast food. Because typically with fast food, people are eating hamburgers and chicken and whatever else that's, deep fried and, flour and French fries, sodas, all that stuff. And typically you'll find there's also an association with diabetes. Throat's kind of scratchy. Or increasing hemoglobin A1Cs. So in these studies, what we're probably seeing is just an overall unhealthy diet pattern, usually, probably much higher glycemic load overall, and just junk food in general, whether it's coming from animal or plant origin. And that's probably more to blame for these correlation studies. Now, mind you, the magnitude of effect of these studies and the the absolute risk reduction implied from lowering protein intake according to these studies is so freaking low. It's not in any way, shape, or form powerful enough to actually apply that to real-world application. But most of the human trials we have and clinical evidence seems to suggest that if you have healthy functioning kidneys, and this is the mainstream evidence-based kind of recommendation, this is really most actual nutrition and dietitian recommendations that are made about this, is for the average healthy human who doesn't have kidney disease or anything like that, consuming, my eyes are watering, consuming around 1 gram of protein per pound of lean mass, okay? Or I like to use ideal body weight, but if we're being accurate to the research, 1 gram per pound of lean mass, okay, per day, is unlikely or has not been shown to damage the kidneys or show any signs of kidney damage or be a potential threat or risk for kidney health. However, if you have kidney disease, no matter what stage it is, or any concerns about your kidney health in regards to things like type 2 diabetes, which can contribute to kidney disease, that's a different story. Problems with your kidneys, only having one kidney, stuff like that, you should check with your doctor regularly and kind of what was probably a good idea in practice with your doctor would be at a baseline before even making changes to your diet, get a baseline kidney health panel, and really a comprehensive panel as a whole, especially in regards to kidney health. And then, start to incrementally and moderately change the diet, working with your doctor and maybe a licensed dietitian to increase protein incrementally. And then after 4 weeks of a moderate increase of protein intake, test levels again. And then if you're good to go and no problematic signs on the kidney panel afterwards that are significant or a serious cause for concern, add some more, maybe 20 grams at a time until you reach that ideal amount of protein. Checking your kidney panels every, maybe 3 to 4 weeks or so, give or take, right? Because a change in kidney health panel should happen relatively quickly. We're talking 1 to 2 weeks, really. You should be able to see a difference on your blood markers and your analysis and other things, right? So that's more of a scientific approach, a medical approach, evidence-based approach, right? Now, if we're just like, if I was having kidney pain and water retention, those are signs of kidney health issues, But to kind of like make a wide sweeping suggestion that protein is bad and everyone should eat moderate protein because, oh my God, it might kill your kidneys, that isn't right. If you are having kidney health issues when increasing protein, chances are you probably had kidney health issues before and just didn't know it till now, right? Because you don't just start eating, more protein or more sodium or whatever, and then suddenly it damages your kidneys or puts a stress on your kidneys. Not how it works. Unhealthy kidneys, though, on the other hand, that's a serious issue. So yeah, we covered the muscle wasting thing. Did I complete that already? Yeah, I mean, from many different angles. But for me, the biggest one is just seeing all the 1 meal a day athletes, including myself, that don't have that issue. Under eating total protein, though, I've noticed no matter meal timing or whatever has a huge issue. You might feel better eating more protein spread out throughout the day, though. But that's subjective. Objectively, just get enough protein, right? Yeah, so this person claiming like muscle wasting from 1 meal a day, come on, man. There's a rate limiting process inside the body as well. So not just from digestion, but many other things. So this person continues. Let's see, did I cover everything? I think just about everything. The other thing is make sure your fucking training program is actually sound. If you're not trying to increase reps or increase weight over time, that could explain some of your muscle issues right there. But yeah, because even athletes cutting calories for competition and not eating the amount of protein this person's eating. This person, if you're eating 200 to 250 grams, that's probably more than enough. And if you're seeing muscle wasting, you're probably not training properly. You probably need to train harder. And this idea that if you train too hard or with too much volume, you lose gains, the opposite's actually been shown through the research. Just recently, there was a study showing like up to 52 sets to failure or close to failure per muscle group per week. Actually shows a dose-dependent improvement in hypertrophy and muscle gain. So the more volume you do, probably the fucking better, even though you'll feel like shit the first couple weeks of adapting to it. So overtraining and all this shit, no. It's undertraining combined with undereating protein as a whole that is going to contribute to stalling muscle gains. But if you're seeing muscle wasting, because it doesn't take much training, like just one set close to failure per week per muscle group, combined with, like half your body weight in grams of protein, you should be able to maintain muscle. But I would never say that you should just, especially on the protein front, I'd say you should be aiming for, 1.5 grams per kilo at minimum if you want to at least retain muscle, let alone gain muscle. So yeah, it doesn't take much protein in training to retain muscle. Like you think you're muscle wasting. That's hilarious unless your training just sucks. Because if you're not giving a stimulus to muscle, it doesn't matter how much protein you're eating. Even though we mentioned that sedentary individual study who doubled their protein intake with no weight training at all, and they gained fucking muscle. These people that think, I'm not laughing at this commenter, I apologize, but like experts who tell you're gonna, 1 meal a day you'll have muscle wasting. That's crazy, man. Motherfuckers don't read science. Probably, and I've seen Stephanie's training. I've seen it. Maybe she's changed it, but when I followed her, like 2015 to 2019-ish, she didn't really seem to train much. So, and I think, again, I could have sworn she advocated under eating protein. That's another thing I want to mention. To stay in ketosis, so I'll make a whole video about tips for muscle building, because I got a comments on that too. Maintaining ketosis. So there's been studies on the, modified Atkins diet, where basically you don't need to restrict protein to stay in ketosis. That's another thing these people will say. So carbohydrate scarcity, exogenous carbohydrate scarcity alone will trigger ketosis. Depleting the liver of glycogen from exogenous carbohydrate sources what depletes the liver of glycogen. Your muscle, this is the other thing I want to touch on. Your body doesn't preferentially burn muscle for gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis is a demand-driven process, okay, where essentially whether you're fasting to trigger it or just not eating carbs to trigger it, the body will obviously convert body fat into ketones, but also convert the glycerol backbone of triglycerides and pyruvate and other sources from the Cori cycle, as well as free fatty acids. And there's also this mysterious phenomenon known as fat droplets that can fuel certain glucose-needed processes, and then some amino acids from the diet, okay, particularly alanine, but I believe also glutamine and glutamic acid and some of these other ones can be converted into glucose if there's a demand for it, okay? Muscle wasting does not happen until, especially if you're not eating overall protein throughout the day, combined with you already being so freaking lean that it is a survival threat to burn any more body fat. So we're talking at least under 7% body fat, right, for males, and probably around 14% body fat for females. And that's just more of a average assumption based on the research rather than any kind of attempt at a practical fact. But it's hard to even quantify muscle wasting from fasting in research terms to make an absolute statement like that. I don't know how Stephanie was able to make an absolute statement like that their body will prefer muscle loss. Like, where's this evidence? I need to see a study. Where's the study? Like, she comes up with a lot of things, and that's fine because she's a coach, and this is usually she says stuff like this because of what she's seen with clients. But if I were telling people that they need to restrict protein to stay in ketosis, and I'm having people with muscle wasting and stuff, I'd be more so concerned with my protein recommendations, right? So if you're following Stephanie's protocol where you're eating I think it's like a 60% of your calories from protein and 30 to 40, was it 80% fat and then what? I don't even know, 70% fat, whatever. She, from what I understand, advocates a high-fat, lower-protein ketogenic diet. And so if you're under eating protein, then yeah, more frequently throughout the day for sure. Yeah. But if you're eating a rational amount for sports performance and to fuel your health and everything else, yeah, you don't need to fucking eat, frequently throughout the day. Muscle wasting probably from under eating protein as a whole. Like, that's what I would say. So, yeah. Anyway, so this person says basically, they go on to say that some people claim they reverse their stage 3 to 4 kidney disease by doing a carnivore diet, while others say excess protein is bad for the kidneys. Okay, again, not medical advice, definitely not telling anybody to do anything to solve the disease or anything. Work with a freaking doctor if you have kidney disease. However, reading people's anecdotes about how they themselves have healed kidney disease by eating a carnivore diet, or other people who claim to reverse gout from a carnivore diet, supposedly the mechanisms of gout stem from, purines and uric acid and things that are filtered out from the kidney, and its relation to whether it's fructose or protein. That's up for discussion. But it's a similar mechanism as to what can cause kidney disease. It's a filtering out of problematic substances from the blood. So I would just try to gather as many people's documented medical reports and experiences as possible and make a educated decision for yourself based on the evidence you do have and working with a medical professional. As for the difference between having hundreds of people claiming they reverse disease versus common mainstream claims like protein's bad for your kidneys and this and that, I mean, how many mainstream health claims have been proven wrong, so to speak, or suggested to be wrong by like these communities of people following diets completely opposed to mainstream principles. What I'm saying is, for me personally, I would be very curious and examine these people's anecdotes further, which was the whole point of the video I was actually making that they commented on. But I wouldn't just automatically ignore your kidney pain and your, clear symptoms that something's going on. You know what I'm saying? So if you're feeling better, spreading protein out throughout the day, by all means, keep doing that. See a doctor, see what's going on, and experiment with your sodium intake, right? Like reduce it maybe. So yeah, that's what I would say with all this. I'll make a video talking about ketogenic diets and tips for optimizing it for improving muscle gain and sports performance. I have a whole playlist on keto done right, so go and watch that as well. I believe I touched on it there. I mean, because I've been basically following a carnivore diet since like November 2018 with kind of short experiments of different plant foods and carbs and stuff. And ketogenic for like the first year, I was strict keto and mostly in and out of ketosis since then. Although I bet you I've been in ketosis this entire time, but just implementing carbs around training as well, which is something you can do. You don't have to just be complete zero carb to stay in ketosis. Ketosis isn't a diet change. It's what your body's doing with the energy you're giving it and producing ketones when in a state of scarcity from liver glycogen. So anyway, hope this has helped. Let me know in the comments if there's anything that you disagree with or anything you want to know more about in relation to this subject. And if you want tips on muscle gain and athletic performance for keto, definitely put them down in the comments and I'll make a whole video on it. And subscribe for more awesome stuff like this. Anytime you'll have a question or whatever, obviously hit me up with it. And if I find it's this complex, I'll make a fucking video on it. Love to see y'all in the next video.